hear a lot of new ways to do therapy, but they're all the same thing. And I've been in this business 30 something years. It is now time that you tell the truth. We're going to change the face of mental health.
Alison Lager of Lager Counseling Services. I hadn't heard it explained that way until I heard you speak at that event. It really changed my life, so thank you.
Other people might think it's woo-woo. I don't even care. It is actually science. It actually works. And the biggest crime against humanity is that we are not taught this.
I've got goosebumps now because it hasn't been my experience in therapy to get some of the advice and some of the knowledge that you're dropping for us right now.
What, are you kidding me? What is wrong with them?
The most important years of our life, because our program is being downloaded and we have no control over it. How can someone overcome that?
I'm going to tell you exactly. And I don't want to get too lengthy, but I feel like this is criminal.
Explain it as in much detail as you can.
Okay.
Welcome to another episode of the Real Mentors podcast. As always, REAL stands for Real Examples Altering Lives. And today I'm honored, privileged, and thrilled to have one of my fast friends as a guest, Miss Alison Lager of Lager Counseling Services. She's a licensed clinician and someone who I met in one of those rooms that I always preach about to you all being in, which is a room where people are looking to level up. We were both featured speakers. And as I said, I learned the term fast friends from her because of her energetic, jovial self. We're also now Long Islanders. I believe you're a native Long Islander.
I am.
And I am just a transplant from the Bronx. So without further ado, I want to introduce my friend, Alison Lager. Welcome to the show.
I am so grateful to be here. Whoa. I really am. It's such an honor to just be sitting next to you and not in another event and be able just to speak to your people. I'm just so happy to be here.
And thrilled to have you. Alison and I and Flo ran into each other just last week at Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within. 12,000 people or 15, whatever it was. And we just happened to be sitting next to each other. So go figure, we didn't know we were going to be at the event. And we happened to be next to each other. And that's how the universe works. And it put us in contact with each other. Alison, tell us a little bit more about what it is you do. What's your day job? And then we'll get into exactly how I think you can shed some light on some of the struggles that my audience deals with.
I would love to. So basically what I do is, by profession, I'm a therapist. And that started a long time ago. And I just left foot, right foot. So what I want to say to your audience about that is that as you're hearing me explain what I've done, is that this left foot, right foot that I've done, incremental moves throughout my life that were just naturally moved along, I believe, by God, the universe, or, source. And what happened was I just did the next right thing. And through each struggle, grew and learned how to level up. And what I did was I started out in my profession as a therapist, and then I continued to learn and grow, open my own practice, and then allowed it to grow organically. Just by giving and growing, I think that creates exponential growth. And then I just hired people, and then now I have a couple of locations, and we're going to open a bunch more. But I believe in growth, and I hope everyone who's listening can just catch that. It doesn't matter how difficult life becomes, because all of that is like the squeezing you into where you can ultimately end up being either a victim or a victor. So I feel like I just continually took the path of being, overcoming hard things, and voila, 32 years later. Yeah. You've
had a pretty interesting story, which I have been privileged enough to, hear and also read about in your book. And, I'll be honest, I come in and I see this, good looking older white lady, and I'm not expecting.
Do you have to say older? Like, what the fudge? Like, what is that about?
Well,
good looking older white woman. Okay.
Because I'm stereotyping. And that is how we come to conclusions, right? Yes. And when I met you, it was like, all right, and you've got the Long Island accent and the vibe, but the generosity in the heart is what really shined through for me. And when you got to telling me about your story, it's the constant reminder that our bullshit that we tell ourselves, if we're in that place of limitation, and again, this was 2 years ago when I was a different person. I wasn't as open as I am today. So that's why I told that story that way, is I expected you to be a certain way. And then you told me about your upbringing, which was chaos and kind of crazy. And that endeared me to you instantly because I would not have assumed that. With that bullshit stereotype that I came in.
What would you have assumed? I'm curious.
That you just grew up okay and you had it all together. And you tell me a little bit about growing up like a hippie and just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you grew up, because you talked about all these things squeezing you into this place that you end up being. And all of us have a story. And I like to tell my audience that the chaos that you feel is fucking you up is actually making you stronger.
100%.
And it's that narrative shift within our heads. So tell us a little bit about where and how you grew up, and then we'll get into,
I love that you just showcased all that, because what I want to say, I'm just going to bring back to this moment that I made a decision. But when I was writing my book, I was doing my last edit. And I was at this beautiful place, and I was getting a massage, and I had this supernatural experience, literally, and it's real. And it was God or an angel. I don't know what it was, but it said it's time that you've been hiding your talent for far too long. And it is now time that you tell the truth. And I was writing, the name of my book was The Truth is Good Enough. That's what it was at first, but I changed it. My whole point was, and that what I was hiding was, and what God showed me was, you need to tell them what your true education is. Your true education is not 8 years of college. And what hit me, I was in a session, and this was when I used to see clients. I was in a session, and this woman said to me, I was encouraging her, and she said, "But Alison, I'm not you." And it just hit me so hard in my heart. I was like, wow, this woman thinks that I have just got it all together, like what you just said.
Exactly.
And I'm like, if she only knew, I've had a much worse life than her, and she's acting like a victim. But anyhow, so that brought me to a place that, and I wrote in my book all the different things that I went through. So to back up, to answer your question, I grew up in I had really bohemian parents who were hippies, basically raised myself. I don't want to call it neglected anymore, because I think it taught me so much independence, so much resilience. I was little, like running outside of my neighborhood, naked and dirty, basically. And that's real. And, I lived in a nice neighborhood on Long Island, but my house was the one with the lawn up to here. The house of shame for me. I had so many different experiences. I had older brothers. They were partiers. I was sexually abused. I had a lot of different things that happened in my life. I always believed in God, but there was something inside of me that always knew that this was happening for a reason. Not as what is the real reason to be, feel badly or be hurt, but what is the real reason? What am I learning from this? And this was really young. I just kind of knew that I had to find a way. And that's what just kept happening. As I moved forward through my life, there's so many funny stories. I think they're funny now, which they're not funny if other people are living them. I want to be evidence, true evidence for anyone listening or anyone in that dark time, because I've been there. I didn't want to make it sound like, even when I was little, when I was hurting or I was sad, that I always was happy. I wasn't, but I knew there was more. So anybody who's hurting, I want people to understand, like I lived with a guy who was like a drug dealer and had guns and weapons and stuff. I've been in situations where I was in a murder trial. I was a witness in a murder trial. There's so many different things that you'd never think. Almost sounds like I'm making it up, but I could just rattle it off. And it's, to me now, it's comical only in that I just see the value in all of it and each thing it taught me. And sometimes it taught me to be a victim. I'm not going to lie.
Right.
So even if somebody's feeling like, oh, I'm never going to get out of this, I could tell anybody at any time that you have an opportunity where you can get out. And every time you learn something, it keeps you from having to learn it again. I've had to repeat the same thing many times.
Yeah, we rarely get it right the first time, if ever. And as we get older and we get wiser and we get more skilled, then yeah, we're more likely to succeed more quickly. But it's also the acceptance of reality versus repeating that cycle of mistakes. And you mentioned the voice.
Yeah.
And I think that's a blessing. And I think many people that are struggling, even at a young age, there's a voice inside of them that tells them that they're meant for more, or that this too shall pass, or that things will get better. And despite your admission that you've repeated some of those mistakes young in life, both, as a child, I'm sure, when we don't know any better, and then also as a young adult when we're learning, and then also as an adult when we should know better, but we're caught in that story. That voice, it doesn't subside for you.
No.
And that's what allows you to keep pushing forward. What would you say to somebody who's been through all the shit like you've been through?
Yeah.
And they still have that voice, but maybe it's not resonating as loudly. And to some extent, they have taken on that victim mentality. Is there a way that you feel they can kind of empower themselves again? And how would they be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's really super practical, not easy, but simple ways to get back. And I tell people, it sounds so corny, but it does work. I experiment on myself even now. I want to know that these things actually work, and they do. And I think the voice recedes in the back. It gets smaller and smaller because the other voice is so loud. And with one of the things that happens is I'm going to give like strategic, practical things to do. One is, you hear about affirmations and they are valid, but because of the way our brain works, can I throw some neuroscience in there?
Please do.
Okay. So bottom line is 0 to 7 years old, we're in a theta brainwave. And what that means is we are in a hypnotic state. So everything that's coming in, all the nuances, all the experiences, we are being programmed at that time and hypnotized. And we are also drawing our own conclusions about that. And it can be from a 4-year-old's perspective. So that young child is creating a meaning about all their experiences, and it can be true or untrue. Mostly it's untrue and it's young. And then we keep building upon that over and over again. That builds into something that then can be a real problem. So my favorite quote ever by Alvin Toffler, and he says, the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read or write. It's those who cannot learn, unlearn, and learn again. So what we do is we live in an operating system. This is our body, our vessel, and our body is programmed. And until we know that, one of the first things to do if you're in that state is just somewhere inside of yourself, believe in your heart that what I'm saying is possibly true. And then say, somehow, some way, my body is doing a lot of the dictating of my outcomes because I'm programmed. My mind, my thoughts are all programmed. Our thoughts are electrical impulses that run on a loop and they repeat. And what we tend to do, we've heard this a billion times. I don't know if your listeners have heard, but we have about 95,000, who knows how many.
Yeah. A whole lot of thoughts.
A whole lot of thoughts a day. I have like 150,000. And those thoughts are 91% of them are the same thoughts we thought yesterday. Most people are living the same lives day in and day out. They're repeating that same life. They just recreate it with a different cast of characters. It could be the same relationship with a different person. And if you're looking at the person, I keep being with this type of person over and over again. People do that their whole life. But instead, they say, they don't seem similar. Well, is your feeling similar? Does it ignite the same thing in you? And if it does, you're repeating the same thing.
I want to stop you there because I guess a simpler way to say it is the law of attraction.
100%.
And you changed my life. And when you started talking 0 to 7, I got emotional.
Yes.
Because I hadn't heard it explained that way until I heard you speak at that event.
Yes.
It really changed my life. So thank you. You flatter me.
Yeah.
But your knowledge, because I'm willing to take in new information, changed the relationship that I have with my children.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason being is my children are 2 and 7. But when I met you, they were 5 and unborn.
Yes.
Or just being born. And I have made it my business to dedicate more time, more energy, and be more, be more deliberate as a parent, because you've shown the light on how important the ages of 0 to 7 are.
Yeah.
And you explained it like being a computer program. That computer program is running itself just naturally. You go into an app and it's designed to do a thing because it's programmed that way. Mm-hmm. And I think most people don't understand that simple yet difficult to overcome concept.
Yes.
And it's that, why do I keep getting the same fucking result?
Exactly.
And they don't know that they're running a program. And why do I always attract this kind of woman? Why do I always attract this kind of man? Why do I always, attract people that drink or smoke weed or like the same things that I do, which aren't productive? And I realized that after you said that. So thank you, because you've been very flattering of me, but you have an amazing ability to put that in perspective in a simple way, because that is your expertise. So with that said, 0 to 7, the most important years of our life, because our program is being downloaded and we have no control over it.
Exactly.
And how can someone
I'm going to tell you
overcome that?
I'm going to tell you exactly. And I don't want to get too lengthy, but I feel like
Take
this
your
is
time
criminal.
And explain it as in much detail as you can.
Okay. Because I find it literally criminal that we're not teaching people this. It is such a simple concept. As you're developing all of this in your childhood, 0 to 7, right? There's the other part, that little filter, 2 inches. It's a reticular activating system. We hear it everywhere on social media, but what it is it filters out the continual information that continues to be fed through our 5 senses, through our operating system. It is fed into our body in all these different ways. And that information, as it's fed, is either allowed in or not. It will filter out things that are not like-minded with what is already in our operating system. So if a child draws some conclusion that men are bad because they saw their dad yelling at their mom, and then any man that comes along, if there's any good information, it will not be allowed in. If there's negative information, it will be allowed in, to build more and more of a system that can be troublesome later on. It's a wonderful body that we have, because how would any child learn how to read or write? Because they have to be programmed to do that. The other thing is that we have this other part of us, it's chemistry, and that's our emotions. And our emotions, we become chemically addicted to the feelings we feel the most. So I always ask people, what is, and I would ask your audience, if you're in a state, what would you say is the feeling that you have felt the most throughout your childhood? I know in my childhood, the feeling that I felt the most was kind of alone and sad. But whenever I would get excited or too high in that emotion, my body needed to bring me back to a balanced state chemically and would draw me back to seeing things that would make me sad or lonely. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense to me.
This happens in relationships as well. People in marriages and in relationships already know. If I said to you, Sean, you know exactly what your wife would do if you said, hey, hon, I found this adorable little baby monkey. It's about 2 inches and I'm bringing it home today. You know exactly what she'd say.
She said, hell yeah.
There you go.
Have another one.
Exactly. Some people would say, they would be like, no way. But people know what their spouse would say. If you said, hey, I'm going to go out with a few buddies. I'm not going to be home till about 3 a.m. You know what your wife would say. What would she say?
Get your ass home.
Get your ass home, as she should. But anyhow, I agree with her. But the point is that, and it could be little subtle nuances, but it's already programmed. Right. So you can change the programming in your life if you can push through the pushback that comes from an external source. It could be your family or whatever it is, because people are scripted and they want to stay alive. And the way that you stay alive is to not change.
We are hardwired, and to some degree, we are on autopilot.
Yes.
Now, yes, you're going to make progress. Yes, you're going to get wiser. Yes, your behaviors are going to change, but your home, the place that you live in, your emotional home, and the kinds of things, behaviors, and people that you attract and tolerate will always come back to that.
You must change it.
And how do we do that?
I'm going to tell you how to do it. The first step always is you have to know. Number one is the truth is a pathway to all freedom. And nothing changes until it becomes what it is. So awareness,
and
being
admittance
awake.
Too, if I can stop you, admittance, because people will stew in their denial that the problem is not coming from them. It's all the external sources, but they're attracting it because of the lack of awareness and the lack of ability to admit that they have the power to change that. So instead they try to change others.
100%. The whole world is doing that. They're living in a reactionary state, which is a state of, it's a prison, and it's where all conflict lies. Yeah. And
what's easier to change, right? The world or yourself?
Exactly.
Change yourself and the world will change with it.
Exactly. It's so simple.
It is. And people make it harder, and all the external sources that drive us into our own thought corners are perpetuating that problem. Again, we all have control over ourselves. And let's say we get a person that's come to the acceptance and admittance, they just had enough. They're tired of getting this fucking same result.
Yes.
It's my story. That was your story. What are some of the simple things we can do as human beings to overcome that?
The first thing is you have to, it's emotional sobriety. So emotional sobriety is that no matter what is happening around you, an event occurs, you have to get very head, heart, feet all in the same spot. Whatever the event is, it could be the smallest little thing outside of yourself, and you recognize what it is that you feel inside. When a person immediately goes outward, that's an emotionally drunk person, and you will just keep repeating the same result. So the first step is, no matter what happens, is you stop and breathe, go inward. And then the first question is never about what that other person, place, or thing is, was, did. That matters, but it doesn't matter initially. Because all of us cannot handle a situation wisely or effectively without first clearing out any chaos that's inside related to it. Sometimes it's very hard for people. They don't know what they feel. They've never learned that. It doesn't matter who you are, what you've learned, how hard things have been. Every single person can change in a very, very simple way. The first thing is deciding that today I am going to learn to do things differently somehow. Because our brain, every time we tell ourselves something, the molecules in our brain changes. Should I keep going?
Please, because it can support that narrative, or you can rebuke it. Yes. And by rebuking it and questioning it, you're now giving yourself step one in the process to changing it. But if you are in a blame game or a victim mentality where there's no fault of yours, it's just someone else's, you're going to tell yourself that story, which is your body's already hardwired for that. So you're going with the grain. Yeah. So it does take some strength to go against the grain. And that awareness and admittance is step one. And
but let's think about it. Yeah, but think about it. At first, it'll feel like you're pushing a 500-pound rock up a hill. And you know what? Honestly, it doesn't matter. If you feel that experience, that you're pushing a rock up a hill, at least you know you're doing something because you're feeling that. If your mindset is telling you that if something happens that is hurtful or bad or difficult, someone is to blame. If that's happening, if you believe that, then you're going to look to blame. And if you think about when you look inward, oh, I'm blaming myself. How about you're just accepting that you have things stored in you that you will do better in life if you find them and clean them out. You want to be awake and aware in the now without judgment.
And that's the hard part.
Yes.
Admittedly.
But it's the most important part. You may have learned as a child, when you hear, what is it about me? Now you're punished,
right,
and you have to punish yourself. No one has to get punished. And you still can talk to that other person. That person could have done a heinous thing to you. It doesn't matter. They've given you an opportunity to get better and to grow more and to possibly create wealth, possibly succeed in life, possibly have great relationships.
And let's use parents, right? Because so many people are hung up on how they were raised by their parents.
Yeah.
I just met this amazing woman at my speech grad class who God put us in front of a fireplace at a dinner with 25 people, and her and I disappeared in each other's stories for about an hour and a half.
Wow.
And unsuspecting little lady, as amazing as they come, who had a crazy, interesting childhood, but viewed it for so many years as just crazy and resentful because her father wasn't in her life. And the acceptance of that to this day was still an issue for her. And I said, the only reason you are who you are is because he wasn't in your life.
100%.
He was a fucking disaster. And if he would have been in your life, you would have been a disaster. And then she got to telling me about her mom, who was an exec during the 80s on Wall Street, the first one, who was also a card counting gambler who was known and blackballed in Vegas. So I'm telling her my story of growing up in the projects and going to prison. And she goes, mine was the total opposite. We would fly the Concorde and we would go for trips to Vegas, and told me about her mom. I'm like, that's fucking awesome. But she didn't see it that way. And she, to her credit, is now pivoting from a career in corporate. She did all the things she was supposed to as a mom. She put her kids through college. And upon writing that last check for her daughter's tuition, she decided to shift and become the entrepreneur that she always knew and wanted to be. But she still had trouble accepting that the father was the reason for that. His absence in her life, which she constructed as this missing link, was actually the reason that she was so powerful and so capable. And my father wasn't in my life. And I'm thankful for that. Not because he was terrible or anything, just because my mother and my life that I have, that's why you have me today. Like we can't like go back in the past. There's no Back to the Future. There's no DeLorean with a fucking flux capacitor that's going to change that reality. You have one?
I do.
Oh, I would love to come see it.
No, I do have one. You can do it right now, actually.
Tell me more.
Because all of those, we're just a record of memory in our body. Everything that happened already happened.
Right.
And everything is now. You can actually go into your body and you can restructure and reframe your memory the way that you'd like it to make it better. You can go in, I take people in to their story that's keeping them stuck. And I say, what room are we in? Oh, your father's screaming at you about your homework. And what do you feel? I feel stupid. And then I say, what do you think of her? And then sometimes people will say, well, I think she's stupid. And I'll say, what do you think I think of her? And then they'll say, you think that she's being abused. You think that she's probably smart, or whatever they think I think. And then I say, let's go to another door and let's look at a girl the same age. And now tell me what you would think if you were viewing that. And they look, and then they say, I know that she's smart. And I say, well, go in there and tell her. And what would you say to that man? Go tell him. So they'll go in and they'll say, the only reason that you were speaking to that little girl that way is because you're afraid of her not being smart enough. Or they'll tell him to shut up, or they'll knock him down, or they'll take the girl out of the room. But it literally changed them. They're never the same again. People get stuck at certain ages. So that's why you'll see two adults in a room screaming at one another. There's no adult in the room at that moment because they haven't emotionally developed past 4, 8, 12.
Whenever that trauma had occurred.
Yeah, because you split off from your emotional self, and then everything else grows. You can become a great, great successful entrepreneur, but still be, when you're triggered, a 4-year-old child screaming and having a tantrum.
And I want to go back to because that's, I guess, the aha moment for them, that they're creating that story. Because when you give them the freedom to look through a different door as a different person, not themselves.
Yes.
They're like, oh shit, I'm the one telling myself that story. But if you give them permission to be someone else looking through the door, it's the same mind creating a different story.
Yes. But it's because they've developed a hatred for that part of themselves and they left that part of themselves. Most of us have done that because we needed to survive. I can't be sitting in a corner crying and not taking care of myself when there's no one to take care of me. I have to leave the part of me that's crying at 4 and get up and go make a sandwich. Then I feel like punching them in the face because I feel like they are neglectful or whatever, you know.
Right.
What you were saying about fathers before, I just want to comment.
Sure.
And that woman, on my way here, this is not a coincidence. On my way here, I was flooded with a supernatural gratitude. It was just flowing in the traffic. It was flowing in me. It was real.
An unusual place to be,
No,
gracious,
I find gratitude in traffic. So basically I was in that moment and I was thanking my father who was passive and who was neglectful. And I would say, Dad, I just want to thank you so much because you made me draw into being more powerful. And you also made me draw into seeing the value in an alpha masculine male. You know, I always tell people, never tell your children, your spouse, or anyone something that you want them to tell themselves. Never tell them. Because they can't tell themselves that if you tell them. So if my father showed up in all those ways that I needed, it made me dig in further to know what I wanted further. So a lot of the wrestling that people are having in their life right now, anybody listening, anybody who's struggling in their life, it's very helpful to understand I'm in a struggle right now, but this actual struggle is building a muscle in me that I'm not even aware of, even if I'm acting like an asshole, because we all do. So it's like, okay, what can I learn from this? What did this just squeeze out of me? Right? And I think that any judgment will only hurt us. It just means we feel threatened.
Right. And by not judging, you're giving yourself grace.
Yes.
You're giving yourself permission to free yourself from the shackles of those stories that you're telling yourself. And what I meant to say too about the father thing was, if you're going to blame them for the bad, then blame them for the good.
Yes.
And that's just as simple as it is. That's how you find gratitude in traffic.
Yes.
There's really nothing to be thankful for about being stuck in New York City traffic and taking 2+ hours to get here, which thank you, by the way, in the rain. But if you can find that ability, you have freed yourself from the shackles of not being able to control your old thoughts.
Yes.
And I heard the most beautiful quote, which was, fear is our inability to manage our thoughts. We are either focused on something that happened in the past and somehow still feeling it, or focused on an outcome in the future that has yet to happen and we have no control over.
Yes.
So the goal is to live in the moment. And yes, in the moment there's traffic, but there's also the ability to think whatever thoughts you want, turn on whatever music you want, podcast you want, hopefully the Real Mentors podcast.
Exactly.
And, it's a choice. Unfortunately for so many, it's an unconscious choice. But I want to circle around to a different subject, which is you have this creative way, because I've done therapy. And I think so many people have embraced the idea of therapy more so over this last decade than ever before. My own opinion to some level in a crippling way where, there's mental health crises. And I think it's more of a crisis of not having the tools to escape that story, that circular story that we're trapped in. So where did you come up with these unconventional approaches to treatment? When did that happen? How did that happen? And is that the norm? Because it hasn't been my experience in therapy to get some of the advice and some of the knowledge that you're dropping for us right now.
I don't think it's good therapy when a client comes in and then a therapist is running around with them, putting out one fire after another. So I tell the therapists that work for me, there is always a fire burning in the middle of the room. We do not work on circumstances. We work on the inner person to ensure that those symptoms don't come back, and that's when we step on the gas. So how did I come up with it? The way that I came up with every single thing I do is because I have done it with myself. You'll hear a lot of new ways to do therapy, and there's always new coined terms, but they're all the same thing. Yes, usually people go in, they say, how was your week? You vent about your week. Then the therapist gives you a couple of tips and tricks, and then you kind of walk out. I don't even know. I will be angry if anyone that works for me does that.
Right.
It is not an option,
right,
because you're paying someone to go there and get to the heart of what's really causing the problem, and that will cause it again. And then they return to the same behavior because they don't understand about, we have a map. We're like, I'm trying to get to California, so I'm following my map. How the hell did I end up in Mississippi again?
Right.
And it's because your navigation is not set properly.
Now, the root problem there is just awareness of the fact that GPS is not set properly, because you're getting to vent in a traditional therapeutic setting. You are addressing some of the issues, but there's kind of this, I've solved the problem, and you take your eyes off of the GPS, and then you end up back in Mississippi.
Well, you're focusing on the problem and not the solution. Mm-hmm. And also, whatever we practice, we get good at. I'm really good at marriage counseling. I think I'm fucking great at it, by the way, but I do. But anyhow, I do. I mean, because I think it's so simple.
Absolutely.
I never let anybody come in and practice arguing in my office. I'm like, you do that at home. Does it work? We're not doing it here.
It's crazy, because I've been to, marriage counseling in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
And it was that. It was either one person or the other venting.
And then there's going to be, now you got a referee. You know what?
Yes.
You don't.
Holy shit.
No.
Right.
There's no refereeing in marriage counseling. And if you're doing that, don't leave.
And the last time we did marriage counseling, it was somebody with, I jokingly will say, a more bohemian sense of self.
Yeah.
And she was a California girl and just had a very big awareness of the story and the cycle. And we talk, triggers is a big word these days. So, there's triggers. Someone does something to you in a relationship of any kind, but let's just say a marriage, and you automatically revert back to however that hardwiring is designed to take you to that place. And then boom, they respond in kind. And here we are doing that circular dance. Mm-hmm. And it seems like you can't escape the issue because you're not addressing the root cause.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for discovering and embracing a new way to tackle it. And I think maybe that comes from your passion to work on the self. And that's how 100%. We met. I'm a Tony Robbins student. You're an Arete Syndicate student with Ed and Andy Frisella and Mylette, for those of you who may not know. And these are the rooms where we learn about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you were doing the work prior to that, but
forever.
I think people that are trained both medically or in therapy of, the mind are trained in the traditional sense. And like anything, right? Technology doesn't stay the same. Mm-hmm. The knowledge of the body has progressed immensely. Technology's progressed immensely. And our understanding of the mind and behaviors have grown immensely. But the educational process has wildly stood the same. And therefore, they're trained in a certain way. And they just continue that story of how to treat these things.
Yeah.
Do you see that in the field that you're in, there's some kind of progress being made, or is it still the same old story?
We're gonna change the face of mental health. We're gonna make it better. That's my whole plan. It's my mission. We look to help people find their true desire and goals and step on the gas and help them get there.
Why do you think that's so important? For someone to chase down a goal or attain the wins or follow their dreams?
I'll tell you why. I think that all of us are like apple seeds or like an acorn. I have a tattoo with an acorn on my arm. So many acorns fall from a tree and like two become, a tree. Like thousands can fall and like two of them will become a tree. And all the information is in an apple seed. All the information is in an acorn to become this wildly incredible fruit producing that will serve, right? And we're that. I feel like we're an apple seed. All the data is in us. All the desires have been put in us by God. I think if you have a desire, a passion, something inside of you, it's meant for you. If you do not have a meaningful pursuit in your life, you will feel depressed. If you do not see that, I lay hold of my vision, obstacles must give way. If you keep your eye on that vision, you will get there. And it doesn't matter if you get bumped up along the way because everything else bows to you. So these triggers are just blocks. Whenever somebody says to me, because he, because she, I say, absolutely not. We're not going to ever use the word because he or because she ever again in our lives. Because if they say because he, because she, because that, because whatever, if they say that, then they have not found themselves. Then they cannot be free. Then they cannot find their dream. I was getting mad at one of my employees once. More than once. Oops.
Well,
many times.
That's because you're challenging them to dig deeper, even within themselves.
You're being kind to me. I get mad at them, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
And then I say, Alison, you were being kind. He's giving me a way out. Don't listen. Okay.
You don't get this successful without having that trigger button.
No, he was just going to give me the excuse right there because of this. And no, not because of that. I was getting mad at my employee. Maybe my employee did not do what they should have done, possibly. However, how many times have I felt this exact feeling before? Oh, because it's just the way it is as an entrepreneur. Okay, possibly. But how come I have felt this so many times in my life, this terrible feeling, and I'm so tired of feeling it. And I've been in this business 30 something years, and this feels very familiar. How about I take a look at myself and then I can address them? So now I look and I say, oh, because I had a mother that if I handed her the ketchup bottle and I said, Mom, could you open this? She couldn't figure it out. So then when somebody is neglectful or seems like they don't know how to do something, it triggers something inside of me that's fear, that doesn't feel right, that, you know what? What are you kidding me? Like, what is the problem inside of me? I think, what is wrong with them? Now, if I'm asking myself what is wrong with them, I would have to turn around and ask myself, what is causing that?
And what is wrong with me?
Exactly.
I appreciate you calling me out on it. No, because that is a perfect example of how we're unaware of the loop and the story. And it's so much easier to blame or, make an excuse or tell a story that gives you permission to continue being the same. So I just did it unconsciously to protect you. Yes. Imagine how much we do that to protect ourselves.
Constantly.
Every day, all day.
And you know how compelling it is to be a victim? It is so comforting.
Oh, man. It's all of these coaching calls that we get on.
Yeah.
There's one universal thing that we start with. It's let's celebrate the wins.
Yes.
Because I have friends and family that when you get on the phone with them after not speaking to them for a while, they just want to give you all the fucking negativity. Yes. And it is just like, holy shit. And I remember this one call with somebody I love dearly. And it was ba, 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 the sky is falling.
Yes.
And me being me, I was like, listen, how can we start all our conversations like this? Is there nothing going on good in your life? And they rifled off more things that were going well, and their state changed, and their demeanor changed, and everything changed, but they're so programmed to just start with the bullshit and just nest in it and just
where do we learn
it?
Think about if you're home, if you're sick or whatever, like one of the things that can happen when you're little is that if you have a problem, you'll go to your parent. So there's a lot of rewards for having a problem, and people will give you more attention. And you'll get a lot more love. And if people have coupled together, because what we do is we, like with habits, it's also with emotion. We couple together behavior and feeling, what we get for it. So I always ask people, what are the secondary gains? What are you getting from, nothing, I'm not getting anything. You're getting something, even if it's the bad thing that you're getting. Like sometimes people will say they're addicted to something. And I'll say, well, what is it? What is the payoff? What are you getting from it? And they're like, nothing, just misery. I'm like, well, misery might be your payoff.
Misery loves company.
You may love to have the feeling of misery or shame. Maybe you're addicted to shame and not that particular substance.
Right, not the thing that brings you to it, but the actual feeling.
Yeah.
So, my big purpose is to address the places that I come from.
Yeah.
Inner city, particularly impoverished black and brown, raised in the projects in the Bronx, so much dysfunction and so much trauma.
Yeah.
And so much of the same story being repeated generation after generation after generation. And it feels unescapable. And there's this belief that the system is out to get you.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I can say, thank God for my mom, whose family and her immigrated here early from the Dominican Republic at the age of 11. She was the first one to graduate college. And despite us living in the projects, because she was a single mom and we didn't have a second income to get out of the projects, I grew up around people that were predominantly dependent on the system. And she got up and went to work every day for the majority of her life. And, listen, we still had to have credit at the bodega to get it past the 2 weeks. And, there were problems with substances in the home. And again, all things that I've accepted, I don't judge anybody for. I've had my own problems with. But what would you tell a person, and unfortunately an entire community that believes that there's no hope? Because that is the belief for so many people where I come from, that there is no hope, so why even try?
Yep.
How do we give them the tools, the strength? How do we empower them? Because I'm still learning.
Yeah, I'll tell you how. There is no one who is exempt from this. Right. And I think that anyone who is in such a dark place, anybody in any location who does not have hope is in the darkest place, that there's no way out. Just even to take moments where you say, I'm just going to look for that one little spark inside. And we do not want to look for evidence outside of ourselves because you're not going to get it there at times. So the most important thing, and I believe this, I'm positive of this, and other people might think it's woo-woo. I don't even care. It is actually science. That if you can change the way you think, you can change your entire life, and it's actually magic. It actually works. It is science. It is quantum physics. It is real. And the biggest crime against humanity is that we are not taught this. It is a fact.
I've got goosebumps now because I was doing some content prior to this and I shared it with Flo, and I came away from an amazing weekend at the mastermind I was just at. And I came away with the tagline, magic is real.
It is
real. You just
real.
have to believe it is.
Yes.
And that belief is the hard part for so many. But
belief
there are vibrations
everything
in the universe. And I always use the example of natural disasters. There are animals that know it comes or knows that it's coming before it actually happens. And that's because they are still in tune with the frequencies and vibrations of God and the universe and Mother Earth, whatever it is that you choose to believe. Whereas human beings have lost that. We are now in civilized societies where we have lost our relationship to nature and our relationship to that vibration that the universe operates on.
We've been taught not to listen to it.
Right.
Oh, stop.
The highest level functioning people in the history of this planet have been aware of this.
Yes. And it's time that it's no longer a secret. The secret. There are actual practical things that people can do that are literally magical, and they can be anything that I have accomplished. It has come from a repeated mantra and words that I take over my mind with. And I usually do it in threes. Like one thing I did, I mean, it sounds weird, but I don't care. And it's kind of weird to say it on here, but I did it for a long time. You just let it go. You just start saying the thing and then you just let it go. So like I would say, I'm long, lean, tight, and smooth. And I am that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it took maybe 2 years, but when you tell your brain something, it is a goal-driven machine and it will do it. The other thing is that this is a tip that's very important. You've probably heard it. Tony does a little of that I saw, but I do this thing myself. I just thought it was cool that I'm like, I didn't even copy him. But anyhow, I'm like, oh, he copied me.
Well, these practices are universal.
They are.
Tony 100%. Robbins or Ed Milet or, these are all people that are reciting things that have been known for thousands of years by the great philosophers.
All the way to the Bible.
So it's just regurgitated information and, it's presented in a manner that's more modernized and more palatable, easy to digest way. But go ahead.
But you know what it is? That we're all getting this information from God. living a long time in the traditional Christian sense, when we hear the word magic, we think it's evil. So when I use the word magic, I just mean miraculous, that we're made for the miraculous. We're made for supernatural things. And our environment in this world that we're in is the 3D world. Our senses, our 5 senses, are the dumbest down, slowest vibration that there is. We're taking in information, even just in psychology of perception 101, the data coming in is so limited to what is really happening all around us. So there's all these frequencies around us. The unseen is more valid than the seen, and we're taught the opposite. But what people can do is when they make a decision about their state, my choice in my state is always enthusiasm, joy, and peace, because you can be peaceful and enthusiastic at the same time, and you don't have to be reactive. If you make a decision, a grounding point of the state of being you would like to live in, so that is my choice, what I like. Anything that throughout the day at any time that deviates from that, I feel it right away because I'm honed in on that state of being. I don't want to, and I will not allow myself to be in another state. I'll allow myself to cry and feel normal feelings, but it's with this state in mind. Then, so when you have that thought that deviates, if you think that thought for 16, 17 seconds, what happens is that it draws another like thought to it, because like begets like attracts like. So if you think a negative thought like, oh, I am whatever, not good enough, whatever, what that does is if you stay with that thought, it will draw another one and another one and another one. It's like popcorn. Bam, 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 bam. And it builds a whole thing. So 2 hours later, you're like, why am I in such a bad mood? And this is a thing called chain analysis, where you follow the thoughts back. You say, well, when was the moment that I actually felt good? And it was like, oh, when I was in the supermarket, I felt good. I was happy then. Oh, what happened? I don't know, that cashier was snotty to me, or that person who was good looking, I thought that maybe they wouldn't like me, or whatever it was. And then you realize I just went down a whole path that took over my whole day. And you can become a master of it.
You have to believe that things will get better. And you have to hold on to that belief. And you can't seek out external validation because the other people around you, unfortunately, do not believe it. So it's that beautiful scene in The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, where he's on the rooftop shooting basketball, his son, and he tells him, you're probably not going to be that good anyway if you're like your old man. And then, the father realizes what he just told his son. And essentially, after seeing his son put down the basketball and just kind of get deflated in his demeanor, he corrects him and he says, don't you ever let anybody, not even me, tell you that you can't do something.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, we're all not going to have that movie moment where our parent's going to realize it, because our parent could be completely unaware of it. So to all of those people, I would just say, and I always have said, hold out hope. Even my wife, and I hope she doesn't, I'll ask her if we can air this, but, my wife had a pretty not great upbringing. And she always told herself, wow, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. And we have a fucking life that you can only dream of because we met each other. And that was the hope that I would hope to extend to everybody who's in their darkest place and feels like there's no way out. Tell yourself and don't let go that it is going to get better.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's that simple.
It really is. And you know what it is? Know that when you're saying it, like your wife said, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. But that repeated answer to the circumstance is a commanding power. And I think everyone needs to know, wherever you are, that you have the power within you. And we're not taught that. Right. You have creative power within you to create a life through just your thoughts, because our thoughts move faster than the speed of light, and they have more power than physically doing something. And we're not taught that. And it's very confusing to us to actually believe, because we think, oh, that's not possible. It is the most possible thing. It is the thing that creates. So I will throw in, I have been so many times in my life, repeatedly in situations that were impossible. How could I ever feel better? You know, my husband died by suicide. I don't know if you know, but when I was in my early 20s, I had a fiance who also died by suicide that I found dead. Yes. So how does something like that happen to someone twice in their life? You can imagine the thoughts that I have that it's got to be me, like all these things, right? So I don't even know if I would have you air this, but the truth is that I had to find a way. I was like, I've done this before, I've experienced before, and I got out. I had evidence that I got out. I knew that this was a hard road. I knew what was ahead of me, but I made a decision. I think I may have told you this. Day 3, I said to my kids, to myself, I said, okay, we have to make a decision that somehow, some way, if it takes us the rest of our lives, that we will gain more than we have lost. Like about a year and a half after my husband died. And by the way, I was crazy about him.
I know.
It's not just like, you know, I mean, and I'm just not saying that completely one of a kind, like miraculous. And I'm not just saying that because he died. I don't do that. Like I never liked that when people do that.
I've cried over this before, so I know your heart.
Saying to my kids and to myself that, at a year and a half, I said, you know what? I feel really down. Like I felt really down. I was like, let me take a look at the last year and a half and see what are my wins? What have I gained? And I just started writing things, one thing after another. And I was like, oh, wow. I couldn't believe after that day, a year and a half, all the things that I had accomplished. And the only reason I accomplished them, and they were meaningful things, like my daughter was very, very close to my husband, and she saw him as her confidant, but I'm her confidant. We're so close. And we probably wouldn't have been. I mean, we would have a great relationship, but it just wouldn't. And it doesn't mean that, you know, it was good that he died, but it shows that all goodness comes.
You accepted it.
Yes.
And you had the tools, and you had more tools than the first time around. So I wasn't aware that happened twice. I don't say it because I don't want people to think I'm a crazy person. I'm like, wow, how does it happen twice? That's what I thought. I was like, what is wrong with me? And now this might ruin my dating life for God, you know. But, man.
Yeah, right?
Don't hear this podcast.
Please keep this out. All right. No.
Listen, I appreciate you so much for sharing that. I wasn't going to, and I'm glad that you did.
Yeah.
Because that's the reason you're here right now, is because that preconceived notion I had when I first met you, the walls came crumbling down on that bullshit story. And we can learn so much from each other.
Yep.
And I want the audience to know that story, because if you're feeling down, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling hopeless, imagine, that.
Yeah.
Witnessing one person you loved or you were with early on commit suicide, and then the love of your life.
Yeah.
Years later, the father of your children.
I don't think God or the creator of this universe sees pain the way we see it. So we know that when our child is crying on the ground because they want a cookie before dinner and they're really in pain, they feel maybe rejected or whatever the hell it is. You don't love me. I don't know. But whatever they're feeling, we feel like that's better for them. And there's this kind of weird thing that can happen where we have all these ideas about death. We have all these ideas about pain and struggle. And I think we really miss the mark. Because if you just lean into it, just like in yoga, you lean into something that you can't move, a body part that hurts, and you lean in and you breathe, something good comes of it, and part of your body opens up. Yeah, so if you allow yourself like to lean in, like I lean in and say, we go from life to life. Life doesn't end. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. CJ is very vibrant and alive. And I'm, and this is all part of my story. How can I grow and give more because of it?
Right. And it's such a beautiful story. And I'm so happy that we got to do this in person.
Yes.
And there was no mistake that we all met last week at UPW. So Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for shining your light and sharing your knowledge. I'd love for you to share a little bit more information about your counseling services and the book so that people have resources to follow up on this interview with.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am the owner and founder of Lager Counseling Services. It's on Long Island. We do a lot of like cutting edge stuff, medication management, brain tap. We also have art therapists, EMDR. We do all sorts of great stuff. And then I have a podcast, Alison Answers, and Crushing Mediocrity. And the name of my book is The Wake Up Call. It's an interactive guide to changing and creating the life you want. And it actually has workbook questions in it where you break down every area of your life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, socially, and vocationally, into the snapshot of what your belief system is. And then we extract thoughts, feelings, and how to change them.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming out. The book is called The Wake Up Call. And the reason I wanted you to do that is because I've gone through a good percentage of the book, not all of it, admittedly, but the workbook is really the key because that gives you the tools that you need. Because a lot of us just don't have a fucking clue.
Yes.
And that will give you the tools to make things that much simpler so that you can start to make the progress in your life that you know you want to make and you've been called to make, but you just don't know how to. So I'm going to right now volunteer to buy 20 copies. And for the first 20 people that reach out to us, I will send you a copy on my dime so that you can get working on your best self, because that's what we're all about here. Thank you as always for tuning in to the Real Mentors podcast. Follow Alison on all her platforms and her podcast, and we will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.